Let me introduce my guest to you. I have Victor Bwire. He is a programs manager at the Media Council of Kenya. Thank you for joining us. And Dorothy Jebet, first time, I believe, on Press Pass. Thank you for joining us. She is a member of, actually an official at the Kenya Union of Journalists and also a political commentator, both titles relevant to the discussion tonight, as you will see. And Henry Maina, he is the East Africa Region Director for Article 19. Thank you for joining us. And Gunjiri, looking impressed by the title there as he looks at Maina. Gunjiri Wabogo, he's not a stranger to this and has quite the many friends and enemies in equal measure from the audience and alike. But he's used to that. Thank you for joining us. He's a political commentator and also strategist, all in the same. For this part of the discussion, he'll probably be a bit quiet, but I'll have him also give an input. And this is what I'm talking about. Journalists from the coastal region are set to hold protests this week on Thursday. This follows a series of cases of harassment, intimidation, and even death of journalists in the line of duty. Last week, there were similar protests in Nairobi, Nyeri, and other centers against the intimidation and growing threat to members of the Fourth Estate. The Kenya Union of Journalists has called on the authorities to investigate the killing of Standard Group journalist, late Joseph Masha. That's not all. 2 weeks ago, 2 journalists based in Murang'a County were seriously injured after they were beaten up by security guards from Kakuzi Farm.
Article 34 and 35 of the Constitution safeguards Kenya's freedom of expression, free and independent media, and access of information.
And non-state actors to ensure that the space for journalists who report on duty holders' actions and any crime bent on individual regarding social justice, land grabbing, corruption, and other matters is shrinking at an alarming rate.
Calling upon the media owners of the media houses to really be in the forefront to ensure that the work that is done by the men and women who go out there to collect information and stories to inform Kenyans, that work is respected, it is protected, and that any time a journalist is subjected to any act that is against the law, that they come in and fully support them, and that they ensure that the due process of the law takes course.
Let's get perspective on this, and I'll start with Victor Bwire. You are from the Media Council, so I'm sure you get many cases reported to you, and you're following up on others. These are just some of the recent incidences where journalists in the line of duty have either been harassed, have been intimidated, or even killed. How bad is it?
Thank you, Mark. The situation is bad, and moving from bad to worse in the recent time, obviously, either because of what the journalists are doing and what people perceive with the role of journalists. And that has increasingly, the journalists are vulnerable because quite a number of our journalists, one, work without minimum basic welfare requirements. None of them have contracts, none of them. You would find that most of the journalists who are protected with medical insurance and the rest are people who are employed who work in media houses in the offices. But quite a number of our, 70% actually, of the correspondents work without contracts. That makes them very vulnerable. That's one of the main challenges that we are having. Now, two, once those journalists are exposed to that level, then it opens up the way people deal with them. Now, increasingly with a hostile electoral environment, because in Kenya what's happening, while we have laws that would constrict press freedom, but the laws obviously of late have been used, but we see more of personalized group, criminal gangs, political activists attacking journalists simply because they think they are being used either to lower their political positions or the rest.
And increasingly being normalized.
Normalized. So we are getting cases, especially from at county levels, that are worrying. Obviously, you have mentioned in Nyeri, you saw what happened. 2 journalists were injured, 2 lady journalists, and people are being taken to court tomorrow. In Lamu, we saw again a journalist being harassed by an MCA. That has been recorded. Just the other day, we have a case from Kisii. We have a case from Nyamira where 2 journalists are planning their fellow colleagues to be banned and chopped. And it's also taking a tribal dimension that people feel that if these journalists do not come from this area, then they should go to their home areas to report. So it's also taking that you would see a few of the journalists even within themselves. So that is making journalists very vulnerable in terms of the work they are doing.
All right.
So that's a major concern that each of us must be concerned about.
All right. Now, I'd want you to explain on whether Media Council can do anything in terms of helping those who have been the receiving end of threats or attacks. You tell us a bit more about that. But earlier you mentioned there was some shocking revelations about some journalists threatening other journalists in regions because they own a turf. You'll tell us a bit more about that. As an official from the Kenya Union of Journalists, you've already called for investigations to take place against in the death of Joseph Masha.
Yes.
But has anything been done? Can you confirm this?
Nothing much has been done, just like the cases of the other journalists that have been killed or maimed previously. But we are believing that investigations will take place as soon as possible.
You believe?
Yeah, because it is a trend. It has been a trend that journalists are killed. Nothing is happening. Even the police don't have the capacity to investigate, or they'll just give promises that we are investigating, and we will leave no stone unturned. But at the end of the day, no one has ever been prosecuted for killing a journalist. No one has ever been taken to court for injuring a journalist. We had a case in Tana River about 2 years ago during the clashes. What happened? That was a straight case. The attackers were known, they were well known, they were captured on camera, but nothing happened. Recently, we had another case in Kitale. About 2 days ago, a journalist was killed. We have not heard from the police or from any authority that they are doing something.
So where does this leave, if a journalist is part of your union, where does this leave them in terms of confidence? Is there anything that you're able to do for them? Or
the union is trying its best because of we are financially constrained. We can only do much because of we don't have the finances. But we can offer legal assistance free to the journalists if there is a perpetrator or an attacker who has been arrested. The journalist will be given free legal assistance. He doesn't have to, or she doesn't have to pay for any legal fees.
But unfortunately, you say no investigation so
no
far.
investigation. So I don't know
really
where we are heading really, and it's getting worse as we head to 2017. It will be worse for journalists.
And we'll explore that issue of getting into 2017.
Yeah.
We're not just raising the alarm here for no reason, but it does get a bit unsafe for journalists.
Masai, I also would like to tell journalists that there's no story worth dying for. Right. If you feel that your life is in danger, please just backtrack. Right. No story is worth dying for.
Henry, as a champion for human rights, I would imagine that you are keen on this. First, there has been the criticism or critique that journalists, why are you making noise? You're not any special than any other profession. Other people in other professions are killed in the line of duty, and they don't quite make noise about it. Is it a case here of expecting special treatment?
No, I think we need to understand the role of journalists vis-a-vis the other professions. Nobody is elevating journalists to say journalism is a special profession. But for any society that has taken off and grown well, it has respected journalists. Any society that is on a reverse gear begins first by destroying journalism. And therefore, the others follow, because at least there's not going to be anybody to document. As opposed to what we've seen before. The situation, as Victor says, is a bit worrying, given that we've had a number of cases of deaths before. Francis Nyaruri was killed, last seen in the hands of police officers who he had gone to interview. Many years have gone by, and there hasn't been any credible investigation and prosecution. You fast track that, you jump a few years, you get to John Kitui, he was killed in Eldoret, nothing has happened. Then you get to Masha, and a day or so before Masha is buried, there is a photojournalist killed in Kitale. That is not normal, even though we are a society that only reacts to big numbers. We want mass killings for us to say killing is wrong, because Kenya is the only country I know of where one life doesn't matter. We begin to look for reasons. And that's a challenge that we all need to be aware that one life is as important as any other. And why I think this is an indicator that something is going wrong, one is the normalization that has come into it. Two, there is a rationalization. Other professions and other individuals beginning to ask, are you really professional? Which media house do you work for? So then we begin to think that if you work for a certain media house, if you come from a certain ethnic group, if you come from a certain region, then you are worth dying. Yeah? It is only those who are from the other regions that ought to be protected. And for me, that's where the problem in the country lies. What I would think that KUJ and Media Council of Kenya ought to do, I think one is to put in credible petitions to the office of the DPP and give timelines. In the event that that petition is not acted upon, they should utilize opportunities that exist for private prosecution. Then they would be forced to move beyond just saying and crying for investigation, but putting in parallel processes of investigation and evidence storage.
As I hear you speak, Henry, it seems as if no one has come to you for help in terms of
people have
Article 19. Have you helped in this
directly?
Case?
We've recorded 23 cases of attacks against journalists and 10 against bloggers. You would know that I've gone to court previously to challenge constitutionality of certain sections that journalists have been prosecuted under. So I can do certain things to the limitation of my mandate and resources. But one of the things that I know we haven't done in this country is to put pressure to the security agencies and to the office of the DPP that investigations must happen. And those investigations must find a closure. When we say, for sure, we've done this investigation for 8 months, we can't see who killed John Kitui. We can't see any hand in the death of Masha.
Right.
And therefore, this is the closure the country is going to arrive at. We can't see who killed Francis Nyaruri. But when we gloss over them and normalize and rationalize, you begin to see from the GSU officers beating up journalists in Tana River to security guards in Kakuzi Farm. Because those security guards have developed some sense of impunity. They are asking themselves, if the officers in Galana were not prosecuted, who are we to be prosecuted? It is okay to beat them and find some reason to explain they were trespassing.
Let me throw this to Ngojiri, because he is a political commentator metamorphosizing into a politician. He calls himself as a Nyeri politician. And there's been not too good comments or even a lot to write home about in terms of Nyeri treatment of journalists. What do you have to say about this?
Thank you, Mark. First, I think the first thing, as I was listening to my fellow panelists, the first thing I noticed that I think is harmful to the solution of any similar problem. Because I was here when we were discussing the lawyer killing by police. I have seen several such initiatives happen every time a particular person from a particular group gets killed. And what I think we're doing that is harmful for this country is that we are starting to isolate groups and dealing with them, with the problems that happen to those groups as if they're specific to that group. You see, when I listen to the kind of things that I'm hearing that have happened to journalists, I know of cases where they've happened to other people as well. And I agree with Henry that yes, that they come first for the journalists so that you don't have anybody documenting what is happening. But when you start trying to create solutions for the attacks on the journalists, then what happens is that you have now isolated the journalists from the rest of society. And you're giving the impression that they are actually special. And then that now comes to, when I think about this case that I'm hearing about guards attacking journalists, what you do is that we're in a very interesting society. When you make somebody special, when you create the fact that they are special, and then they find themselves at a disadvantage in a particular situation, they tend to suffer more than other people. Because this guard will be thinking, unaonanga wewe ni mtu mkubwa sana juu unatembeanga na kamera. now I have found you at a disadvantage, because you already created a perception that this person is special. I think what we need to do, all of us, and this is important for KUJ and Media Council and the non-governmental organizations that we have in the country, we need to force, what we should be doing is actually forcing the government to create a standard operating procedure. That's how they work, SOPs. A standard operating procedure of what happens when somebody gets attacked by security officers, by politicians, by activists. What is the process? Because if we start saying there's a process, we saw what happened with the lawyers and how much pressure they're able to exert on the system. Why? Because they're officers of the court, so they're able to go on strike and not go to court and grind the entire judicial system to a halt. Well, but then not too many people can do that.
We're not able to go on strike.
That's what I'm saying. You see, so the media can't go on strike, because if they go on strike, then as my colleague said, a lot of them are working or don't have contracts. So if you're not working, somebody else is actually going to go and deliver.
I'm not suggesting that strike is the only way out to really exert pressure, but to that point where he says we make ourselves, if we isolate ourselves, we make ourselves special.
It's not special. But even the law, if you read the Geneva Convention recognizes journalists as a special group. I mean, it's not just in Kenya alone, because sometimes they carry out duties that would ordinarily are not normal in the sense. So it's not the people who are special, but people recognize, like doctors, they have occupational health protection simply because of the work they do, the nature of the work. So the Geneva Convention recognizes journalists as a special group in the sense of the work they do. Yeah. So to that extent, then, as we are saying, in fact, we approach the judiciary because there's a program where they need to help judiciary understand special skills on investigating journalist-related offenses. And that's the conference that's happening in Arusha right now, I mean over the weekend. Because there's a feeling that, yes, they are not special, but sometimes the nature of their work exposes them to unique experiences. Yes. You need to accompany maybe KDF soldiers to Somalia. So then it exposes you to some level where you are not a trained soldier, but you are accompanying soldiers. So how should you be treated in that sense?
Nobody is saying that by focusing more on a vulnerable group, that the bigger societal processes, standards, as he would want to put it, have been put to a halt. It is not an either-or process. It is when you begin to look at society in those binaries that things become problematic. The reason as to why politicians have, for one reason or another, had to say we need bodyguards or we need our homes to be guarded is because they play a certain special role in society. Not that they are special people. It is the function that they carry out that we seek to protect for the bigger society that we are going to call democratic. Right. So standard operating procedures are a good thing. But what of in a society where discussions about those standard procedures has been there for nearly 20 years? The first time Wallace Gishere was pushed from a building by security officers in Buruburu, there was a discussion in the country. What should officers do when they are going to arrest somebody? And if the person is vulnerable, how do they secure the site? And all those things. That discussion has been there.
Right.
It hasn't moved forward. And the result is, yes, Wallace Gishere was immobilized. He became disabled out of that process. We didn't see anything moving forward. So today, to use this case to highlight that there is a problem in those standard operation procedures, both of private security agencies, of our own security forces, is a challenge, because once citizens have known that an officer can brutalize a journalist and get away with it, then a private security guard can brutalize you and get away with it. How are you going to explain to other Kenyan who is in a land dispute? In fact, you will notice some of the attacks were about private land disputes, yes, where a provincial administrator had gone to adjudicate. And one camp is feeling that the provincial administrator is going to make a decision against them, and the journalists are documenting. So as they attack the journalists first, once they've brutalized them, they attack the provincial administrator. So we begin to be sowing some seed of impunity, yes, across the whole country.
Right.
So that's why we need to discuss it. It doesn't mean that we would not go for nationalistic approaches that cover everyone, But where this group is getting vulnerable, the truth is that the country gets worse off.
And especially going into 2017, and you skirted around that question. You're good. You're getting good. I asked about the Nyeri politicians, the MCAs who've attacked journalists. Your view on this, especially as one who's going to be a Nyeri politician, especially as we go into 2017, as it seemed that politicians are increasingly more bold to attack journalists.
I think it's actually, and you most probably will not like this answer, but then what I think has been happening is that we've gotten into a system, first and foremost, of definition of who a journalist actually is. He mentioned that he's defended, they've opened cases against 23 journalists and 10 bloggers. So now we've gotten into a situation where if I go out into a function, for example, and I'm a blogger, and then something happens to me, then I will demand for protection as a journalist because I was recording that event. Now we are having the challenge we're having, and now I'm coming to Nyeri.
Yes.
When I read up on Nyeri and I found out what had happened, remember there's been this really silly war going on in Nyeri between the county assembly and the county executive, and so you have a situation where these guys are fighting and then they're getting recorded. And then because they don't want to get recorded, because once you get recorded, it gets beamed out, you're going to look really bad to your electorate. So you want to stop the recording from happening. So these guys are attacking the journalists because they do not want them to project.
But we're in our line of duty. We're doing what
exactly.
we're meant to do.
And I agree with you. And that was wrong. That should not have happened.
Yeah.
But you see, we are now creating a system where I defend myself from the person who I think is making me look bad because it has become normalized. Because I have seen it happen. I have seen it happen we have situations where you have politicians with big security details. And I'm not even talking about the official politicians. I'm talking about the unofficial politicians who are aspirants, who walk around with a gang of boys. And part of their work is to make sure that I do not get taken photographs I do not want. And it goes even beyond that. Talk about functions. You've gone for weddings, you've gone for burials, where guys show up with cameras, take photos, hang them up outside the function and sell them to you. And then if something happens to those guys, you end up finding they were journalists. Right. Because they were told, leave the event. They're like, no, we are covering the event as a journalist. So we need, I think I would challenge KUJ and the Media Council. The first challenge we're having as a nation, that we have not even been able to understand, one, the role of a journalist, and really? Two, who the actual journalists in practice are.
But that's covered in accreditation. Okay.
It's accreditation by the organizers. But you'll find that the people who are attacking journalists now, in fact, I was going to ask, when I saw the demonstrations, who are they actually against? Because the people who are attacking journalists now, very few of them are government. They're being attacked by private structures.
Or by agents of government, some would say.
Well, there have been some that have been attacked by government. But of late, a lot of those attacks are coming from politicians, are coming from private entities.
I need to wrap this section up. I want you to have your say, and Dorothy, then we can move on.
It's clear who are journalists is. It's only the problem again.
How is that clear? I actually don't.
The Media Council Act 2013 is a law that was passed by the president and defined who a journalist
probably
is.
give him a copy.
We will share, no problem.
Actually, I'm not worried. It's not me you need to give. Me, I don't be journalist. The guys you need to give a copy are the guys out there who can't tell the difference between a journalist and a paparazzi, as they call them.
Just impunity.
But like I was saying, the journalists. But two, and the most worrying thing is that the civilized people, because in almost all the incidences where journalists are attacked, you would see either around the politician, either formal or informal, there must be a former journalist or somebody who worked in the media who knows these people. So it's very well planned, and these are the people who tells that's an enemy journalist, that's so and so. So that's the group here. And actually we have appealed even to other government agencies. I mean, like State House, like other ministries, like directorates of all political parties, because the structures are clear. Once you start dealing with the people by whom you know by their names, that's the major challenge. But they know who the journalist is. We have issued all accredited journalists in this country. Is on the website. You can check county by county who is a journalist. If somebody comes to you and says, I'm Victor, I'm a journalist, there's a press card you ask, there's a number you send and confirm if I work with Nation or Standard. Those procedures have been put there. But the people who are doing it deliberately, no. You can even just check the political parties, even their comments. You will see even the directors of communication who are journalists, the comments they are making about which journalists should be done what. You know, that's what the worrying trend.
Sorry to cut you short. Dorothy, you have to have your say. We have to wrap this section up, the segment.
Yes, just listening to Ngunjiri, it's very sad that we are trying to apologize on behalf of those who are beating journalists, or to.
No, I'm not.
Or you,
For the
it's
record.
like you are agreeing with them that it's okay to beat journalists.
Yeah.
We have heard even senior people in this government say that gazeti la kufungia nyamba. What do you expect that the MCA in the ground to do?
It loses respect.
Yeah, it loses respect.
Okay.
To the journalists. When the guys at the top of leadership in this country don't respect journalists.
Well, I'll have